Welcome. I'm just gonna dive right in. I'm gonna take you back somewhere around 20,000 years ago. This is a cave painting in a cave in France, Luchot. It's dated to about 17,300 years ago. It depicts what they call a birdman, and it's in a part of the cave called the shaft scene. This part of the cave is isolated from the whole complex, and it's accessed only by a very steep natural fissure that you have to go down into. They don't let you do that anymore, but 17,000 years ago, no one was there telling you not to do it. And it's kind of like a temple, like an inner sanctum, a holy of the holies, what Western traditions might call it. In this painting, it was discovered in 1940, and the original interpretation of this cave painting, I'm sorry, I'm going to try not to laugh. It's called a hunting accident. So I want you to look at that and see, do you see that? Okay, they called this guy a dead guy, and he's laying there with an erection. And he has a bird head. I don't know why that was helpful in hunting. And he speared this auric, and there's this bird on a stick behind him. Somehow that translated to a hunting accident. Which is interesting because this also brings up the evolution of different sciences, archaeology being one of them, and one of the most resistant to change, because up until about the 1960s, that was this interpretation. Almost equally as silly was the interpretation of the magnitude of Venus figurines that were found across Europe and Africa, etc., and that they were classified as fertility fetishes or Stone Age porn. I kid you not, Stone Age porn. And so it was somewhere around the 1960s that this amazing woman, archaeologist, who was cross-disciplinary, and she kind of challenged this very dominant patriarchal perception by, because she was a linguist, spoke about 7 languages, and she was also specialized in folklore and mythology, and an archaeologist and professor herself. Through her cross-disciplinary approach, started to look at the stories behind these figurines, behind these kinds of paintings, etc. And Maria Gimbutas is her name, you can look her up. She's the one that postulated, much to the uproar of the archaeological community, that at one time on the planet there was a matristic, gynocentric, great cosmic mother belief that lasted for tens of thousands, if not 100,000 years through our ancient ancestry. So it's just an interesting thing to notice the biases that exist, because we have biases also that can seem so prevalent, yet can be upended by somebody who can think outside of the box. My thoughts on this painting when I first saw it was clearly that it was shamanic flight. It was my thinking was informed not just by my cosmology, but by different things I had been exposed to in my life. And one of them was a researcher called Felicitas Goodman, who had an institute called Kaimunga, where they used to do experiential work with archetypal art and iconography found from Paleolithic and Neolithic times. For example, let me put that in human terms. For example, they would find somewhere in South America, a man posed like this, or a figurine posed like this. And interestingly, there'd be one in Africa from the same time frame, and there'd be another one in Europe in around the same time frame. So she started to think, well, that this has much of a significance that we won't know through our own biases. So why don't I get a bunch of people together and put them in these poses and see what it evokes in them? It's phenomenological research. And so when I saw this, I recognized that this figurine was one of the poses that she had found cross-culturally. It's about, I don't know, 31, 35 degrees. And when she put people in that position in a group, they all went into shamanic flight. And almost all of them went to the zenith. They went up and out. As you know, you can go on different journeys when you leave your body. They almost all went up and out and into the cosmos. So when I saw this, I thought to myself, this must be connected to something that our archaic ancestors 17,000 years ago were tuned into. And turns out I was right. Because more recent research has shown that the constellation Cygnus, at the time, again, 17,000 years ago, was circumpolar, i.e. zenith in the sky, and also contains the summer triangle, the Vega, Deneb, and Altair, which would have been of importance to Paleolithic people because it's marking spring and summer, etc. But also brought to mind some other things that I know about. Thinking about this deepest part of the cave, which is accessed only by squeezing down into a fissure that is in some way connected to the zenith of the sky, made me think about that this is a representation of the axis mundi, the world tree, right? The pole that connects the worlds, and that we could speculate that that interconnection represented some liminal edges of the cosmos as was known to our ancient ancestors. This is a place that offered ecstatic trance because of its liminality and access to what is available through those kinds of journeys. If you want to explore more of this yourselves, I would totally tell you to go watch a documentary by Werner Herzog called The Cave of Forgotten Dreams. And it's on a similar cave painting, even more extraordinary than this one, called Cheveau. And all of the researchers that entered this cave, you know, hardened archaeologists, they all experienced the craziest dreams and altered states, and all kinds of things happened to them. And this documentary kind of covers that. So I would, you know, look into that. So this brings to mind also for me, as I said, I've had limited exposure with the Australian Aboriginal people directly, and a wild interest in all things Indigenous. And the Aboriginal people, you know, when we say, well, writing wasn't invented until 3,000 years ago, or 5,000 years ago, 3,000 BC, there was no need for them to write it down. Because to Aboriginal consciousness, the stories are in the land. The stories are in the stars. They're in the rocks, they're in the formations. The only thing needed to acquire the knowledge was simply to shift one's focus, to soften this world focus and enter into the energy behind what is ever present. So to the Aboriginals, the dream time is co-present with reality. And this also reminds me of an Alouette elder called Ilarian Merculef. And he talks about, he's out in the world and he talks about what's called the womb at the center of the universe. And he says, and he was one of the last people to be raised in his Bering Sea tribe as completely traditional, as they're a very isolated tribe. And he says that everything we needed to ever know as a people was found at the womb at the center of the universe, which is probably similar to what the Mayans talked about with the Great Dark Rift, right? And the Shilbaba, the road to the dead. And he says that for thousands of years, his people gained all of their knowledge, everything they needed to know to survive, from spirituality to morality to ethics to survival skills to traditions. They gained that knowledge simply by journeying to the womb at the center of the universe. My point in bringing all of this up is that we have this ability also. It's what I call our archaic ancestral consciousness, and it's available to all of us. It is a time for us, I believe, for us to consider our deeper lineage, but it's only a lineage that we can imagine our way back to. Because it's the power of imagination that spun the web of interconnectedness originally from ourselves to the cosmos. It was only through imagining that that happened. So for us to imagine our way back to this deep knowing is a possibility for us. There's been a dominant worldview since medieval times that and then one of the things we have to do when we're imagining is decondition. And deconditioning is also becoming aware of the kinds of, like I mentioned before, biases or cultural norms or things like that, that we take for granted. And one that I've noticed that started in medieval times is a hierarchical view of the cosmos and the order of beings, and it's called the Great Chain of Beings. And it existed from medieval times till I think still is prevalent in our society, although it's not called that. And the Great Chain of Being is a representation of the order of the cosmos, from God to the demigods, to the angels, to the humans, to the animals, to the rocks, to the minerals, and all of that. It also gives rise to the theory of evolution, because the Great Chain of Being is also depicted like a ladder that can be climbed from rock to plant to animal to human. So it's this hierarchical view. To our archaic ancestors, their view is less hierarchical, it's horizontal and it's vertical. It stretches through time. It's interdimensional. It involves ancestry and lineage. It also involves interconnectedness, in that ancestors are not simply humans that passed before or great elders, but ancestors to any tribe, to any indigenous or aboriginal person, could be a rock or an animal or a star. So, perhaps their consciousness may seem so vastly different to us, simply because that hermetic axiom of, as I said before, when I invoke center, as above, so below, as within, so without, that their consciousness is deeply rooted in that. Hence why the four directions are always important to indigenous and aboriginal peoples. But that connection between the inner world and the outer world is what I call this kind of, again, this unified field of awareness is our ancestral archaic consciousness, and it is our birthright to be able to access that. Just like we inherit tendencies from ancestry that you can look up on, 23andMe or Ancestry.com. Again, we imagine our way back to that kind of interconnectedness and knowing. So as astrologers, we straddle two worlds. On one side, we have the symbolic, the mythic, the archetypal, and on the other side, there's the rational, the realistic, the scientific, the one that is our common current worldview, that which can be proven, which can be reduced, to be understood, concrete. Back in the days, astrology was a science and did incorporate both worlds until it wasn't. Our current collective idolatry, to me, is in this age of enlightenment, age of reason, is an increasing materialism, reductionism, and just getting more and more narrow and more estranged, thus leaving us estranged. Interestingly, the last time Pluto was in Aquarius, if you can put an end of an age into a specific time, it was that time. And so the age of enlightenment, reason, was coming to an end, and the rise of romanticism was happening then. And that had a lot to do with the backlash of the cold, detached, although, I mean, you know, there was a great many things that came out of the age of enlightenment and reason, but humanity also expresses things quite often collectively in extremes. And so the extremity of that then fed romanticism. But the thing that we need to keep in mind is that there's two principles. It's either causal or acausal. It's not either or. It's an and also, right? So just like there's physics and there's quantum mechanics, and quantum mechanics often defies the laws of Newtonian physics, and then there's also metaphysics. And it doesn't have to be an either or. It can be an and also. For ourselves in astrology, when we focus only on the kind of mechanisms of that, we tend to cut it from its divine celestial origin, right? The part that's connected the microcosm to the macrocosm, the inner to the outer, in the here and now. When we do that, we are revealing an unseen energy, like Tara was talking about. You can call it soul, you can call it spirit. And when we do that with clients, one of the most profound things I think we accomplish is to be able to allow to reveal that individual's place within the cosmos, right? So to heal some of that estrangement. And we occupy this really unique position by our profession, in between the worlds, much like a shaman does. We travel the axis mundi, we travel the world tree, we go to the heavens and we bring it down to earth. And through that, we impart meaning. It's very profound. So just keeping in mind that the formula, the mechanism, the technique, the whatever, it's not the whole enchilada. The map is not the territory. It's like a musician who needs to learn scales. Yes, we learn scales. And then we develop chops. And then compositions flow through us because we're embodying soul, right? And soul comes through that technique. So let's not get caught up in polarizations. As we know, the world is incredibly polarized right now. Let's not get caught up in these, what George Orwell called smelly little orthodoxies that are now contending for our souls, especially when we're dealing with the archetypal realm. I use this diagram often to describe different layers of the psyche. I wouldn't say it's complete in its depiction of the psyche, but it does, it's a really great diagram. It's Freud's iceberg model, which describes different levels of consciousness within the psyche. So at the top, I have determined, or I call these daytime, twilight, and nighttime consciousness. At the top of this iceberg is your conscious mind. It's your thoughts, it's your perceptions. It's very much like daytime. The sun is out, things are clear, you can navigate, you're not bumping into trees or each other, unless you're a klutzy sag. Or not paying attention because you're in your head or looking at your phone. And that's what daytime consciousness is. It's the conscious mind. It's what helps us navigate the world, gather information, do things, understand things, explain things, communicate things, etc. It's only 10 to 20% of your total psyche, of what you're capable of. And then there's this really cool layer in the middle that's called the pre-conscious, what Freud called the pre-conscious. I call this twilight consciousness. You can think of this middle layer like like the browser cache. So it's a membrane, it's a liminal space, much like twilight is. So when the sun starts to go down and things get a little murky, you know, things are not all that clear. Is that a bear? Oh no, it's just a garbage can. You know, you're not sure. And that's what twilight is, because twilight space, this space in our consciousness, this liminal space in our consciousness is an admixture between subconscious and conscious mind, right? And so in this pre-conscious state, in twilight consciousness, like I said, it's like this browser cache. It's all the things you need to know, but they're not rolling around in your conscious mind. So like if I said to you, where'd you go to school when you were 5? You can remember that. And that's something that this liminal state has reached into your longer term memory, which is in your subconscious, and brought it up to the consciousness. So it's a Google search. And then we have nighttime consciousness, which is associated with the subconscious. And Freud, of course, pushed everything into the subconscious, all your urges, sex, you know, it's always sex. And he and Jung, of course, had a split, as you know, some of you may know. Jung was a student of Freud's, and without getting into the big long story, Jung generally, through his own exploration of this subconscious realm, came up with the term and the understanding of the collective unconscious. And the collective unconscious is something, so we have an individuated unconscious, which is in the subconscious, and then the collective unconscious. And so to Jung, through his explorations in the collective unconscious, personally and with clients, patients, etc., he started to discover that that is where the archetypes reside. And that's important to know, because in order to access the archetypes, as we are all affected by these archetypes collectively and individually, one needs to fully understand and embrace the archetypes, one needs to fully make that journey to the subconscious where they reside. Now, wouldn't you know, Neptune is sitting at 29 degrees right now. There's a lot happening during this conference. Did you realize, you know, all the Gemini stuff, and then you got Neptune sitting there, anyway. I came across this passion. Do you know the Sabian symbols? Everyone? Yes, please. Okay, good. This is Dane Ridger's interpretation of a particular Sabian symbol, which, as you know, the Sabian symbol for 29 is the next degree 30. And I will read this to you. He calls it a majestic rock formation resembling a face is idealized by a boy who takes it as his ideal of greatness, and as he grows up begins to look like it. And his commentary on it is that, sorry, I lectured for 3 hours this morning already. He said that the power of clearly visualized ideals to mold the life of the visualizer, this power can be developed through visualization when the emotions and the will are poured into the visualized mental image. At the highest spiritual cosmic level, this is the power used by the godlike beings at the close of the cosmic cycle in projecting the basic formula, the word, which will start a new universe. In a biological sense, it's the power latent in all seeds, the power to produce and guide the growth of the future planet. It's a most fitting symbol for the last phase of the cyclic process. Within the end of the cycle, the seed of a new beginning exists in potency. Unless the entire cycle is proven to be a failure. Let's hope not. This is the last stage, the last scene of the great ritual play of cyclic transformations. It brings us to a realization of the power of archetypes as factors, conditioning life's processes. Thus, we could use it as a final keyword called archetypalization. What is archetypalization? I think to boil it down in a simple sense, it's the urge to become that is within all of creation. It's a recognition or a realization of a potency, of a potentiality. It is emergence out of potentiality into reality. The next degree, the Aries point, is the symbol is a woman has just risen from the sea, a seal is embracing her. And individually, that degree talks about selfhood. It talks about differentiated consciousness arising out of the collective oceanic consciousness, individuality. Collectively, that degree speaks of a new cycle of manifesting some still unconscious, new or mutating archetype. I want you to hear that. The archetypes grow and change. And we have the ability, part of what I believe Richard was talking about here is not just shaping ourselves through the archetypes, but the ability through consciousness to engage with and evolve the archetypes ourselves. So this new and mutating or evolving archetype, this coming into this collective awareness, it's still very delicate, it's still very tenuous, yet it's following this instinctive urge, or I'd say it's imbued with this instinctive urge to emerge, yet it's still pulling with it the whole cycle of evolution behind it. And it's trying to mutate it into a new form. So if we are somewhere on the cusp of the Aquarian age, or not at all, depends on which philosophy you follow, Pluto in Aquarius certainly brings up these archetypal energies as well. Because there's this, there's this individuation and thinking outside of the box and new forms and the power of the conscious mind and what it is capable of combined with the collective. So we see some of this already happening in society. The whole New Age movement, let's put it back to, really you could put it back to theosophical thought in the 20s, but really kind of burst into the scene at the harmonic convergence in the 80s. This whole New Age thought and the designation of what's now called unspiritual, not religious, that's kind of new. And that shows an emergence out of the predominant archetype of the Abrahamic religions of the previous 2,000 years. So that in itself is an example of a mutating archetype. The question for ourselves is, at the turning of the age, at the emerging of some nascent kind of urge, what would be your individual contribution to this new collective archetype? What is our collective contribution as astrologers to this emerging archetype? Like I said before, Pluto in Aquarius definitely beckons us to think outside of the box. That's unquestionable. And Neptune, at this really profound degree, invites us to participate consciously in this new vision. So how can our sacred science continue to reach deeper back into its roots, yet still evolve? Rudyard, in his commentary, is also talking about the power of visualization, combining emotion, image, and will, intent, is, and he didn't say this, actually Freud said it, is the royal road to the unconscious. That is how you get there, right? The power of visualization combined with emotion, will, and intent is where you knock on the door of the subconscious and you're entering into the archetypal realm. In astrology, we also see archetypes mutating. There's always that big question. There's lots of arguments in the astrological community, but that big question of modern rulers or traditional rulers. And we can look at the advent or addition of modern rulers as a mutation of archetypes that they represent, right? We can look at them as an expansion of archetypes that essentially are describing a transpersonal dimension of the psyche. Not that those things were not existent before, but it's been brought into the collective awareness, right? That archetypes, the archetypes that they represent, has been brought more squarely into the collective awareness. Ridger's concept of transpersonal is it's implied by the descent of power from above, converging with the aspirations or ascent of the individual. And we have to also become aware that the locus of consciousness has been centered in the individual more progressively in Western civilization. Again, more away from the archaic consciousness and more into the individual. But as we know from what we learn from indigenous peoples and even the Greeks that have this concept of the genius or the genii, that is a separate spirit and energy that inspires one, that using the word, like Ridger was talking ascent, I'm thinking aspiration and I'm thinking enthusiasm, and theos means to become possessed by a god. Right? To be inspired is to be breathed into. To aspire is to breathe upon, right? So you've received something and then you breathe upon something and aspire to that. The idea being that ideas and thoughts and concepts, they don't belong to you. They are something that's in the collective field that visits you, much like the genie or the genii or the daemon. So what are archetypes? They're foundational principles existing within the collective unconscious that shape and are shaped by human experience. They transcend cultural context, they lie deep within the human psyche, they transcend individual and cultural context. In other words, they're omnipresent. When our personal unconscious intertwines with the collective unconscious, when we open to our own nighttime consciousness, when we open to the collective, is where the archetypes reside. Jung said that the archetypes are the watercourse of human experience that's created a riverbed where collective and individual experience has flowed. But think about it. Again, if something inspires or a collective makes a movement outside of that worn riverbed and it changes direction like a river would, you are changing the archetype. We do that individually, we do it collectively. So yes, archetypes live in your unconscious and you access them through your own personal experience and awareness of them. But as I always say, the archetypes have their lives in us as much as we do them. And Jung talked about astrology like the collective unconscious, considering, he was an astrologer, used astrology, consists of symbolic configurations. The planets are the gods, symbols of the powers of the unconscious. I mean, most of the time we live out these energies unconsciously, shaped by the archetypes. And as astrologers, because we know a certain, at least 12 of them, these archetypes, that we then recognize them, right? And awareness is the first way of approaching an archetype, and then you see it everywhere, right? Can any of you not think astrology out in the world? No, never, right? Because you're aware of that. You're aware of that imprinted conditioning. My point also, though, to that is that there's always so much more to know, right? From the direct experience of the archetype itself, outside of the prescribed formula or definition that we've given it. So like I said, to expand our awareness, to contact these gods, these goddesses, we need to meet them where they reside, which is in the soul, which is in the unconscious. Jung also said that archetypes are unknowable themselves, but paradoxically, they can be known because they manifest themselves as images. And how do we get to image? Through imagination. Now I'm going to talk about Hillman a little bit. Those of you who don't know him, he was a contemporary Jungian. So if we think about imagination, we can easily say that all things that were created ever started in the imagination, and that extends to the divine logos, creator, all that is itself. This is what Richard was saying. That same creative power is in you. The seed for everything, the entire cosmos. Imagination is the fuel for the archetypes to be, that urge to be. William Butler Yeats said, the great mind and cosmic memory can be evoked by image and symbols. This is what we do in astrology. Those little squiggly lines and things that we call glyphs, those archetypes, when we use them, we are evoking the cosmic mind, the cosmic memory. They are the doorway to the cosmic mind or to the great mind. And again, we can limit that great mind when we only superimpose a definition upon it and can't open to anything beyond that. So I think, as we all know, astrology is an ongoing learning process, and that's conscious mind process. But what I'm saying is that the archetypes are living beings. The planets are gods, not just because the Greeks said so. Right? And they may not even be those gods. Pretty sure they're not. The language of the soul is myth, metaphor, symbol, image, story, much of which is irrational. And by irrational, I don't mean doesn't make sense, but it belongs to nighttime consciousness. Symbol conveys something deeper to the subconscious that can carry conscious information with it, but also has its foot in the archetypal realm as well. So to invite the archetype, we need to speak its language. We need to allow it to reveal itself to us. As Hillman said, we must get back to the image. He was known for saying all of the time, stick with the image. It's all in the image. Now, image isn't just a vision in your mind. Image can refer to anything that arises within you in a contemplative state. So that can be a sensation, that could be a knowing, it could be a movement, or it could be an image in your mind's eye. When you work with imagery, the idea is not to jump directly to the meaning of the image. It's more to engage with the image, to allow the image to come to life. Simply allow it and follow it. So Hillman always said this, follow the image, follow the image. Jung, of course, his whole body of work is based on this very simple principle. It's called active imagination. So his entire exploration of the subconscious and the collective unconscious and all of those realms was done through this simple allowing the image to arise, engaging with it and following it and letting it come to life within the realm of one's own psyche and how it's perceived. The image, according to Hillman, is inhabited in its depths by a God. The image's movement, as it expresses itself, is a manifestation of the meaning of that being. Image opens us to the numinous. The astrological archetypes, as I said, are living beings. And the power of your imagination is the manifestation of the daemon that exists within astrology, or of the daemon realm. I'm saying the word daemon, D-A-I-M-O-N. I want to make a bumper sticker. I want to make a bumper sticker that says, don't demonize astrology, daemonize it. Somebody, one of you merchants, somebody who has a table, go ahead, you can have it. The daemon is this living being. It's an expression of the spirit within any object or anything actually. So the images and the intimations that arise within us when they're invited are the bridge to the archetypal realm. And interestingly, I love this saying by Hillman, through loving the images of the psyche, the gods are fed, right? They don't like to be ignored, we know that. Nothing likes to be ignored. So engaging them in their own language, with the use of imagery, with the use of the power of imagination, this is food for the gods. Hillman has a whole body of work on psychopathy and imagery and the gods. I won't get into that, but it's really important, interesting stuff. And the other point where Hillman was also addressing that loci of consciousness by saying that the mind is in the imagination rather than the imagination is in the mind. And that's something also to become aware of. So when we work with imagery, which we're going to do, have a little experiential in a minute. When we work with imagery, the important thing to remember is that not everybody's imagery is the same. Meaning it can show up as a little cartoon stick figure, it could show up as a black and white, it's not always technicolor, and it doesn't need to be. Because when you engage with image, like I said, it can be sensation, it can be movement. Most of us, because inner imagery is often associated with the inner sense of clairvoyance. Most of us are not clairvoyant or clairsentient or kinesthetic, right? So we get a sense of knowing, like maybe sometimes, like for me, sometimes imagery is just a flash of something, but there's this immense kind of knowing that downloads with it. And I can engage with that in my inner world. You can engage with that in your inner world by questioning or by putting out intent or invitation to reveal itself further. This is how we work with imagery. So the important part when you work with imagery is to allow it to come to life and let it lead you somewhere. This is what Jung followed deep into his unconscious, right? And he met his soul and his psyche and his ancestors and the sermons of the dead and all that crazy red book stuff. Which basically, you know, he got taken apart. He went deep into the collective. He got totally dissembled. It's a shamanic journey. He got dismembered and then re-put back together through his use of mandalas. We're not going to do that. It happened for him over years and years and years. Opening to the subconscious is not dangerous terrain any different than it is going to sleep at night, which is where, like I said, your nighttime consciousness is irrational, right? Your dreams, yet the images that arise in the dream, we know, can be a profound opening or a gateway to something deeper within your own psyche. If you sit with it, if you contemplate it, if you take it into your waking consciousness and go, what was that rooster in my dream about? The next morning, you know, and maybe you sit there and you let the image come back and you engage with it, right? You continue the dream, but more in a waking dream form, right? That's active imagination. That's what Jung was using. So an image, like I said, can also just impart a knowing. I'm going to share with you, I've shared this before in some other lectures, but I had a journey with Neptune once. I hadn't intended to contact Neptune. I was actually working on an issue with a really frustrating colleague of mine who happened to be very Neptunian. I didn't know, but she was. So she was very unfocused, and I got Neptune all over my chart. I think pretty much touching every planet in my chart, and I have a mutable cross. And I have Jupiter and Pisces in the 12th, so there you have it. It's not that I don't have my own Neptune parts, but I'm also highly, highly proud of my Pluto Virgo in the 6th house that keeps it all organized and tidy. So I was, and especially when I'm doing business, I can be very Virgo and very Sag. I'm directed, I'm, I want to stick to and she was the complete opposite. So clearly, when you hit something like that, you're in rich terrain to find out something about yourself, of what's being expressed or what's being shown. This is what I just lectured on 3 hours about, what's being shown to you that's unconscious within your own psyche. So I did a journey by myself. I stood in my kitchen and I pretended that she was standing over there. And I started just arguing with her and saying, "You're so unfocused and you drive me crazy." Right? And then I went over and became her. This is Gestalt. I teach this stuff in my experiential astrology trainings, where we can become these different archetypes. And so went over and became her. And anyway, a little bit back and forth. And then all of a sudden, this image arose. And it was like this wizard. And he had this star, classic image. And this is the point with imagery. Don't judge it. Don't, nothing. You're not supposed to do anything with imagery when it arises, except let it arise, follow it, engage with the image. And it may not even make sense in the moment. It might make sense later. Doesn't matter. You're engaging with this art. I didn't know. So all of a sudden, Neptune's there as this wizard and does this and kind of makes this movement. And I hear these thundering words in my head that said, "I am the passion behind eternity." Say what? Like, what does that even mean? The passion behind eternity. And so I engaged with the image and I asked, and I said, what do you mean, Mr. Wizard Neptune, the passion behind eternity? And Neptune said, the passion behind eternity means some things are just expressions for the sake of expression. Eternity cares not if they are fixed in time and space. Almost like what Richard was talking about with archetypalization, right? It's the urge to become something. But in Neptune's case, Neptune doesn't even care if it gets fixed in time and space. It's simply the expression of that passion to be. And on a personal level, so yes, that's broad and philosophical and very Sagittarian. On a personal level, it was very profound to me because my Virgo parts suddenly bowed to all of my Pisces parts and Neptune parts and said, yeah, let it go. So this is what, that's like a simple 5-10 minute journey. This is where it can take you into the heart of an archetype of something. So what I'd like to do is an experiment. I wonder if there's anybody here that might know how to dim some lights or something. We're going to do just a little bit of experiential. As you know, it's Norwac's 40th. And as our gift to Norwac, what we're going to do collectively with the hive mind, we're going to knock on the door of the archetypes in the subconscious. I'm going to put up Norwac's birth chart. And I'll guide you through this process. Again, this is just knocking on the door. And you may get an image of something, when you contemplate a particular part of the chart or a symbol or a glyph, and you start knocking on the great memory and the cosmic mind, and you allow an image to arise. And I'm gonna ask you to sit with that image and let the image come to life and see what the image becomes and what does it impart to you. And as our gift to Norwac for its 40 years of service to the astrological community, you will take your little journey, if you feel so invited to do, and go to the rainier room when you have a chance. When you have a chance during the conference, there's a big sheet of paper up there. And there's pens and pencils and markers. And there's also Norwac's chart printed out in there that you can pick up. If you didn't get something during this exercise, you can do it in your own contemplative space. But I encourage you to use the collective energy. Collective energy is a great container when we're all focused together to go deeper. And draw something. Now, like I said, you may not get an image, you may get words, you may get a feeling, you may get a, just put it on there, even if it's words, whatever it is. It's this kind of collective art projects that we're going to be giving to Norwac in gratitude for their 40 years of service to us. Are we ready? Okay. So first, I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. And again, if you're not terribly visual, it really doesn't matter. So I want you to imagine your mind as a serene mountain lake. It's kind of there nestled under this big, vast, dark sky. And you're breathing, become aware of your breathing. With each exhalation, you can let go of some conscious thoughts, worries, and become aware of how water moves that surface of the lake, causing ripples, little waves. And then as you allow your thoughts to clear, that the surface of the lake becomes more and more mirror-like. Really work to just focus on creating that lake that's a representation of your mind at this moment as just absolute stillness. And you're surrounded by this sense of stillness as well as the surface of your lake gets clearer and calmer. You have a sense of vastness and a sense of security, warmth. And you notice the surface of the lake being under this vast dark night sky is reflecting the stars and the planets above. You can see their light shimmering on this mirror-like surface of the lake, imprinting upon your mind like a reflection, connecting you. Feel the energy of the cosmos enveloping you, filling you with a sense of connection and oneness. You're now open to receive these messages through your stillness and your receptivity from the great above. Now gently open your eyes and look to the center, the spiral here in Norwac's birth chart, keeping that sense of connection, of stillness, just looking at the center. And allow your gaze to be drawn to the symbols represented in the chart, the glyphs, the signs. Wherever you're drawn, find some single point that calls to you. And once you have that point, you can allow your conscious mind to fill in its associations. But then we're going to kind of gently set them aside when you close your eyes again. And you can let your conscious mind have its thoughts about the particular meaning of what it was that you saw in the chart. But now close your eyes and bring that image inside, that glyph, whatever point you were looking at. And allow some associated image to arise. Allow some representation of what's the energy that's there. What does it want to show you? What does it want to do? What does it want to say? Allow the image to arise and come to life. Engage with it. And what does it become? I'm going to teach you on a little journey where it just imparts some knowing to you. And when you're ready, you can come back with whatever's been revealed to you, whatever image you received. You can write it down, you can journal it, but what I'm going to encourage you to do when you have a chance is to go to the Rainier room, which is off on the other side of the restaurant, and make a representation of what came to you. A drawing, a saying, a color, a something, as we create this kind of collective art project that will be in there. And maybe what you're going to find is that some people's images are complementary to your images. You might want to add on to their image. It's interesting when you do these kinds of collective art projects, what they become. And like I said, there's printouts of the charts in there that you can also sit with again if you want to. So I guess in conclusion, what I just want to say is keep imagining, keep your minds open, participate in the great mind and the great cosmic memory and allow it to continue to infuse and inspire you. So motivate.